Now that I have all 4 of my squares done, I'm going to seam them together along the edges here. I've chosen a slip stitch seam. You can do a whip stitch seam if you like. It really doesn't matter, but I chose the slip stitch seam because I want a decorative design on the top. Okay, so the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to work the slip stitch seam on the right side of the squares. So you'll notice that here and here, this is the right side of my squares because this is where the camel stitch shows up. The other side is plain. That's the wrong side. So I want to hold the wrong sides of the squares together. So I'm going to keep this one facing up, and this one I'm going to turn over and line them up one on top of the other. And I'm simply going to slip stitch through the back loops only of each square all the way across to the other corner. So to start, I'm going to locate the middle chain of the corner here and insert my hook through one loop. On the corresponding corner, might have to turn it over to see, but I'm going to insert my hook in the middle chain of that corner as well. And I attach my yarn with a simple knot, just very loose, just to keep it from coming out. Like so. All right. Insert my hook right where I attach that yarn, and I'm going to pull up a loop to start. And then I need to chain one so I don't pull that loop too tight. Insert hook through the back loop of that one and through the back loop only of, sometimes it's hard to see, of the corresponding stitch on the other square. Yarn over and pull it through all the loops to slip stitch together. Then I just go into the very next stitch. That one's a little tight. On both squares, slip stitch through all loops. And I just continue doing that all the way across. All right, once I reach the other side of the seam and the other corner, I'm going to complete the last 2 stitches, first in the first chain of each corner, and then in that middle chain of each square. And that's it. We are finished across. To fasten off, I usually just pull the loop up, take my scissors and cut just a little bit of length, and leave enough length so that you can weave in easily. Pull that out. And then what I'll do later on, I'm not going to do it now, but what I'll do later on is after I've put the granny stitch border on, I'll weave that in along this seam here. When you're finished with that one seam, you're going to do the same thing with the other 2 squares, get them sewn in the circle with the slip stitch seam or whatever seam that you've chosen. Notice that with this one color, it adds just a little bit of interest to the seam. That's why I've chosen it. But if you do a whip stitch seam, you're just going to see a ridge here instead of this added design feature. Okay, once I've got all of those sewn in a circle, we're going to head to the granny stitch border. Okay, I have all 4 of my squares sewn together. You can see the seam right here, using that slip stitch seam, and now it's time for me to put on the border. This is really simple. Normally, we're going to do a granny stitch border, by the way. Normally, I would just tie this on in one of these spaces and start with a stacked single crochet. Which is exactly what it says in the pattern. But I'm going to show you an alternative that I really like. So I make a slip knot. Some people start this without a slip knot, but I like to do a slip knot because it keeps the yarn from slipping. This is called a standing double crochet. And what it does is create a double crochet that looks exactly like all of the rest. So to do it, I hold on to the loop that's on my hook because it's going to slip around. So I try to keep it steady. I yarn over, insert the hook in the space where I'm going to make it, and make a double crochet exactly like I normally would. Right? And when I'm finished, I do have this tail off to the side, but I have a stitch that looks exactly like a double crochet because it really is. In that same space, I'm going to finish off my granny stitch. So I work 2 more double crochets in that same space. Keep in mind that we're working in the space where a chain 1 space normally would be. I didn't do a chain 1 space in this square because I wanted this to be a little bit more compact. It would really spread out if I used a chain 1 space. So right where that chain 1 space would be is where I'm going to work the granny stitch. And all I'm going to do is work a granny stitch all the way around the one edge of the cowl. I don't need to show you how to do that because it's pretty simple. We're just going to do that in every space. I will tell you that when we get to this junction where the seam is, we're going to work a granny stitch in the corner of the square that you're currently working on. Skip over the seam, work a granny stitch in the corresponding corner of the next square, and then just continue around working a granny stitch in each space. So I'm going to work this first round of the border, and I will meet you around at the end to show you how to join to that standing double crochet. All right, I'm at the end of round 1 of the border on the first side, and I'm all the way back to the beginning where I need to join. So we did a standing double crochet to begin with. This loop gets a little wonky, but it's doable. So we're going to slip stitch in exactly the same way we normally do. And then that slip knot will pull to the back, and we'll weave that in when we're done. Okay. For round 2, we're going to, this time I'm going to do a stacked single crochet, and it will be in the space to the right of the hook. So the hook is really right here. This space is behind the hook or to the right of the hook. So I'm going to insert my hook, pull up a loop, and make my stacked single crochet to start. Now, again, like I always encourage you, if you like to do a turning chain instead, absolutely do a turning chain. That's no problem. That's actually the final double crochet, counts as the final double crochet for the first granny stitch, which we're going to come back and finish when we come back around. So instead of doing more in that space, I'm going to go to the next space and work a granny stitch. And again, in this round 2, I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did in round 1. I'm just going to work a granny stitch in every single space around. So I'm going to do that, and then I will show you how to finish up round 2. All right, I'm at the end of round 2, and I want to show you how to finish off that first granny stitch I told you about, where we have the stacked single crochet as the third double crochet in that granny stitch. So I finished the last complete granny stitch here. In the space where I worked that stacked single crochet, I'm going to work 2 more double crochets on this side of it. And the stacked single crochet counts as the third one in that group. And I'm going to slip stitch to the top of that stacked single crochet to join the round and finish that first granny stitch. And there it is. So that completes round 2. For round 3, I'm going to slip stitch into the next space, work a stacked single crochet, and then complete the granny stitch with 2 more double crochet. And this is the beginning, actually round 2 is the beginning of our repeat. So what I'll do in round 3 is, again, work a granny stitch in each space around. I'll come to the very end and work the last granny stitch here and then join. The border for each side is 5 rounds. So I worked 1, nope, that's the end of the square, sorry. 1, 2, and this is round 3. I'll work round 3, finish that up, and work rounds 4 and 5, which are a repeat of 2 and 3. Now the border is adjustable, which you want, however many rounds you work on this side, you're going to work on the other side. This very first round looks like it's part of the border, but it's really the last round of the square. You can see it here. Okay, but for the border itself, in the pattern, I ask you to work 5 rounds. Now that's if you're working with a heavy sport weight. The yarn that I'm working with here is actually a light worsted weight, so my cowl is a little bit bigger. So I've already finished the border on the other side. I'll show you what I did. I actually stopped after 4 rounds. So this is the last round of the square itself. Then 1, 2, 3, 4 rounds I worked. Really the width is up to you, but however many rounds you work on one side, you need to work on the opposite side to make sure that they match. All right? So that's it for the Wagon Wheel Cowl. Make sure that you share on social media when you make your very own. Let me show you the really beautiful square right there. And I wish you all the luck with this. Thank you for watching.